Welcome back. The episode 172. The man is Dave Bennett. A few years back, I had a friend reach out to me and say, "Hey, Stray Cats and Jerry Lee Lewis are playing at the some place in Vegas. Let's go." So some friends of mine and I took a road trip. We jumped in the car, drove down, and it was fun to see the Stray Cats and the Killer. And although it wasn't the type of performance I would have expected Jerry Lee Lewis to give in his early days, it was a lot of fun to see this legend of rock and roll. Now, interestingly enough, we had tickets to the Utah Symphony where Dave Bennett was playing and doing a tribute to Jerry Lee Lewis and all of his iconic songs. So, a few weeks after seeing the Killer in concert, we were able to see today's guest in concert with the Utah Symphony. And I'll tell you, it was a blast. We had more fun at that concert than I had watching Jerry Lee Lewis play in person. And it's been fun to connect with him and build an online friendship ever since. Dave Bennett is a unique artist, someone who I look up to because he has so much authenticity to the music that he creates. Now, Steve, why are you putting a musician on the Evolved Man podcast? You might be wondering. Well, when I started this podcast, I wanted to be able to talk to a wide variety of people that I thought were individuals that embodied what it means to be an evolved person, someone who is great at their craft, someone who has been able to tap into the authenticity of creativity, someone who weaves in the overall tenets of health and fitness, but has a deep spiritual connection as well. And Dave Bennett is that sort of man. So I hope you'll enjoy this journey as we walk through Dave's early career up through his now 40th birthday. We talk a little bit about how he got started in the business, who some of his original mentors were, how he's been able to achieve all of his early dreams, and what does it mean to show up as an artist at 40 years old, physically, mentally, emotionally. There's a lot of great takeaways for anyone in this episode, especially if you're not a creative like Dave. So, with that, I want to introduce you to Dave Bennett.
Welcome to the Evolved Man, where we are at war with the mediocrity of modern man. The Evolved Man is for men like you who are willing to be strong, open, and aggressive learners. Men who are not afraid to disrupt and change. It's time we ditch the current conventional idea that we devolve with age, that the dad bod is our destiny, and that the glory days are behind us. Your best isn't behind you, and I'm here to provide you with practical tools, a few tips and tricks, and everyday wisdom to help you evolve into your highest form. Strong, lean, smart, educated, and emotionally intelligent. Now, let's go to war.
Well, Dave Bennett, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Steve. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's so great to have you. You know, a few years back, I had a friend reach out to me and he said, "Hey, Stray Cats, Jerry Lee Lewis, they're playing at a place in Vegas this summer. Let's go." And we took a road trip. We went down, we saw the Killer. And although it was not the type of performance that I would have expected when he was younger, I think he was in his 80s at the time. And that was interesting to see him come on and off the stage with a cane and did his best. Interestingly, we had tickets to this other show, my wife and I, where you were performing some of his hits with the Utah Symphony. And so I was laughing with my friends. I said, what's the coincidence here, right? That at the same time, in about a month or so, we're going to be going to the symphony and hearing this. And that was a much more lively show, if I'm being honest.
Oh,
Coming and watching you play. And I'm a little, I don't know if I should say this or not, because the symphony may revoke my tickets. But we caught this picture because you're not supposed to take pictures in a Bravenel Hall. But we got a picture of you standing on top of the bench, slamming on the piano, and it was the coolest thing. And then my wife got the best picture. We posted it, and then from there, we got connected on social media, and I'll be forever grateful for that that photo and that concert where we were able to get introduced to your music, because it was such a great time and it's been so fun to watch your career. So I really appreciate you coming on, because I'm a big admirer of what you've been putting out. You've got a really unique style to your music.
Well, that's amazing, Steve. I appreciate the kind words, and that's a neat thing about seeing Jerry Lee before us too. I didn't know that part of the story.
Yeah, yeah. It was a lot of fun. It was kind of it was interesting because there was a one song and I can't remember what it was, but he just stopped playing. And he looked at the crowd, and his band would just keep going. He had some other singers that would sing and like fill in when he would forget words or whatever. And he looked down and he goes, "Well, I can't remember what the end of that song was, so I figured that was the perfect place to stop." And I looked at my friends and I said, "Yeah, this is what you get for seeing Jerry Lee Lewis in his 80s."
Yeah, well, he was going to do things his own way. That's for sure.
He always did. So obviously, I'm assuming he was an inspiration to you, because when you play and you're standing up there and you're, you know, vibrantly pounding on the piano and doing what you do, he had to have been one of your early inspirations, right?
Oh, completely. Absolutely. No, he's just one of my favorites. Yeah.
How did you get into music originally?
I started playing clarinet when I was 10, fifth grade band.
Oh, so clarinet was your first instrument. Okay.
Yeah, it is my primary instrument. So
Right.
when we go on the road and play, I'd say probably 70% of the show was on the clarinet. But
Okay.
I started playing when I was 10. Within about a week, I realized I could play by ear. I could hear a melody and sounded good.
Wow.
So then my grandparents bought me a cassette tape of Benny Goodman.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know how else to explain it, but as soon as I heard Benny Goodman and realized that this instrument could sound that way, this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I didn't know whether you could or you couldn't. I didn't know about obstacles or whatever. I just knew that that was my purpose. It was my life from that point on. So the way everything unraveled after that, I began teaching myself to play Benny's songs by ear immediately. What I would do is I'd play little microseconds of each song and then try to find the notes on the clarinet.
Mhm.
And my band director at the time, who was an amazing clarinetist, was also a Benny Goodman fan. I'd go to him each week and show him these songs I was learning, and then he'd help me along and critique it.
Wow.
And so that was that first year. By the time I got in middle school, I would perform a solo at each concert. I didn't have any other musicians to play with, but my band director had a program called Band in a Box where you could program music into it, and it would sound like a jazz group playing behind you. So
Mm.
I'd play along with this thing. But then, come when I was 13 years old, I just got out of the seventh grade. He had a very dear friend that operated a coffee house in downtown Pontiac, Michigan, and they were looking for entertainment. So he took me down there and I tried it out and I got the gig. So throughout the eighth grade, I
At
would go down.
13 years old, you got this
Yeah,
gig.
yeah. So
Wow.
I'd go down there on weekends and play Friday nights, and I was getting paid.
Nice.
And then when I was 14 is when I started touring the country.
Wow.
So I met a trumpet player from Otisville, Michigan, who led a band called the New Reformation Band. They were Dixieland Jazz, and they were really well known in the traditional jazz circuit.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to know Dave Tatro, who was the trumpet player, and I came and sat in with their group one time. And then the next day they called my folks and they said, listen, we're doing a festival in Redding, California. Our clarinet player can't make it. Can Would you allow Dave to come travel with us?
Wow.
And so they gave me all their recordings. I learned all their songs, and we went out and played 10 concerts. And so that was the initial jump start to being on the road. So throughout high school, the road travel just increased each year. So by the time I was a senior in high school, I was traveling most weekends, if not every weekend.
So you've been
And
traveling for 26 years.
yeah,
That's unbelievable. And you've been playing for 30.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It's been an amazing life. I mean, like I say, with the early start, you get thrown into real life at an early age. But I was fortunate. I had guys that were older than me that helped me along and uh, guided me along. I was always in the presence of people that were good, and they protected me and taught me the ropes. And um,
What a cool experience at 14 years old to get to go from Michigan to California and play 10 different shows as like your first travel.
right,
That's amazing.
yeah,
Absolutely.
we had a ball, and the guys were great. It was always a lot of laughs, and it was just good. It was good.
Talk about some of your early muses. Who inspired you besides Benny Goodman, of course.
So after Benny, as far as clarinet players went, I was introduced to Pete Fountain, and Pete was back in the 50s and 60s. He was huge.
Mm.
He was on the Johnny Carson show 59 times, gold records.
Wow.
He was that second generation of like a clarinet player that could make the big time, and he was from New Orleans, and he had this soul in him that was second to none. So that grabbed me. Um, so as far as clarinet players went, Benny and Pete were the big influences. But when I was about 11 or 12, I got hip to Elvis Presley.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yeah, and then
That
I and then
explains a lot.
yeah, and I started hearing the guitar players like
Yeah.
Stevie Ray Vaughan and
Mm.
Hendrix, and so I wanted to learn how to play guitar. So my dad took me down to the pawn shop. We bought a guitar, and I started teaching myself how to play. So then that progressed, and then my dad told me, he said, you got to check out this band called the Stray Cats.
Oh yeah. That was the other band we saw with Jerry Lee.
Yeah, right.
They were
So
there. Yeah.
so this all happened when I was 13 years old, and
Wow.
in around that time, Steve, that swing music was making a comeback. So this is
Yeah.
1997.
Yeah.
So, up until that point, the music that I was listening to, swing and rockabilly,
Mhm.
it was not something that my peers knew about. I was the odd man out. But then all of a sudden, it's in the pop charts, and young folks are starting to dress this way.
Yeah.
There's younger bands playing the music. And I was in my glory because I thought finally people are appreciating this music. So I got hit to Brian Setzer and then
Mhm. Mhm.
rockabilly stuff. And then I heard Jerry Lee. And I didn't know how to play piano at that time, but I heard the music and I really fell in love with it. So as far as me performing the Jerry Lee stuff, I didn't really start doing that until my early 20s.
Okay. Interesting.
So I would dabble at the piano if there was one in the room, like at school, or I could sound out a rough version of Whole Lot of Shaking Going On, but I didn't really know what I was doing. But I think when I was about 23, that Jerry Lee Lewis bug started to kind of get inside me again. And I thought, I really want to learn how to do this. So that's when I really jumped into that style. And I look back at some of the old videos of me doing it back then, and being your own worst critic, I was like, ooh, boy, that was pretty rough. But as time goes on, and time went on, I started to try to hone that style better. And now it's always a part of the show. We always close the show with one or two Jerry Lee Lewis songs because it's just such a fun thing to do. And I love the music. It makes people happy, and
Yeah.
it's great. So that was kind of the progression in those early years of, it was swing and rockabilly and things like that.
While I'm not a musician, I can resonate with everything you're talking about with that progression. This last weekend, I was sitting around and I pulled out Stevie Ray Vaughan and threw him on the vinyl and just listened while I was working on other things. And when the Stray Cats were out, I mean, I fell in love with them from the very beginning. And then as some of those things started to hit the charts and Brian Setzer was doing his own thing, and it started to rise, was kind of one of those things where I don't know if I was like the original hipster, where it's like, oh yeah, I've already been there, done that. I, I found myself doing that way too much in life where I would uh, enjoy something early on. And then when it became popular, I didn't like it as much because it was popular. Right.
Right, right, right.
And so I was like, no, it's not cool anymore. So I can resonate with where you're at when those guys started to take off a little bit more.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool, right? But it
Oh,
was also like I still had a little Beastie Boys inside of me where it wasn't cool to be cool. So when it became cool, it was like, no, 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 that's not cool. So you've had a really interesting evolution with throughout your career with picking up the different genres and different styles and playing different instruments. Talk a little bit more about how has your overall perspective as a musician evolved over time?
um, well, hmm, I would say in the beginning it was all about the clarinet,
Mm.
and I wanted to play that music, Benny's music. But then when I was 17, I wrote my first song. Okay, and it was an Roy Orbison styled song called "Lonesome Highway," which
Okay.
we which we do now as a part of all of our shows. So I think over time, it was all about me trying to master the instruments and to bring back music that was popular in the past. But as I approached 30 years old, and then in my early 30s is when I started writing more of my own music and actually having being brave enough at that time to release it and
Mm.
seeing what happens. Um, I think my perspective now is to, of course, I want to master the instruments I'm playing and make this as quote unquote perfect as I can, make the art
Yeah.
as well
Yeah.
as I can. But I think my view now has changed to where I realize God gave me a gift for a reason,
Hmm.
and it's not just for me. It's to build other people up and to give them some joy. So I think I'm looking at this more of now as this is more of an act of service to serve whoever I'm meant to play for. And since I've looked at it that way, it's really helped take the burden and the pressure off of me because it kind of gets my focus off of being so self-critical and so hard on myself rather to more of okay, I'm going to work as hard as I can, but what can I give to the world? That's what I think I'm here for. So
That's
maybe
beautiful.
my outlook is hopefully a little bit more healthy, but I think when you're a perfectionist level 10, and I unfortunately or fortunately am, I don't know, it can make your life really miserable if you let it.
Yeah.
So
I'm there with you.
currently as we're speaking, like I'm talking about in the last 6 months, I'm really trying hard to shift my focus, and then when I'm able to, on the days that I am successful at it, I enjoy the whole process a lot more.
It
Um,
does take time, doesn't it, to move towards that? Yeah, and
oh,
I think especially as artists, because we all tend to be very self-critical, right? I
oh
think
yeah.
that's part of the perfectionism uh, and the artistic. Like I don't know if you feel this way. I guess let me put it like this. Um, I've always had an idea of what I want to create, whether it's a painting, a podcast episode, if I'm working with a client, helping them to develop their body, I have that perfect image in my mind. And it almost never turns out exactly the way that I want it to, no matter how much I wanted it to be. Right. And as Bob Ross used to say, there's happy little mistakes along the way that just become beautiful parts of the painting. Um, do you feel that pull between giving to the world and yet wanting to pull it back and saying, oh, but it's not perfect yet?
All the time,
Okay.
all the time. I mean, okay, so for instance, we just did this big show at the Brighton Performing Arts Center on my 40th birthday, and
Mhm.
I had it filmed, and unfortunately, I worked myself up into such a tizzy before this because I wanted it to be perfect.
Mm.
There's times when we play and you can't predict this when everything is on and that
Yeah.
special thing happens. And it sends you into this other world. But then when you know there's a lot of attention on an upcoming show and it's going to be captured and you want that to happen, then when you try to force it, generally it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of had to work past that, getting out of my own head for that. And it turned out the amount of love in the room was just overwhelming, and it turned out very well. But yeah, I mean, I went through that whole thing of I want this to be perfect. I want to make sure what I can give is just right. And then when you get there, you're like, well, this is at this point beyond my control. You just
Yeah.
play the can and you let things fall where they are. But yeah, like you say, when you're an artist, I think you're a lot more sensitive to things, good and bad, which
Right.
is
Right.
it has its pros and cons because it drives you into beautiful places when you
Mhm.
let it. But boy, there's always this dark thing that chases you, and you got to kind of learn to
Always.
balance it out.
Yeah.
It,
Always. Well, it's
it's
interesting. And you referenced earlier that when you were talking about the soul, right? That you just felt this soul with the music. I'll tell you this. So this morning, part of what I do in preparation for a podcast is I'll consume whatever it is that I can find that my guests have created. And so this morning, I got on a loop of your rendition of Hallelujah that was on your Blood Moon album.
thanks. Thank you.
And so here, what struck me was just this beautiful balance of sensitivity. There's a moodiness with this soft, jazzy flow to it. And my intent was to go, listen to a lot of different pieces. And I'll be honest with you, I did that rabbit hole on repeat for about an hour and a half this morning, and it pulled me in. And that's one of my favorite songs. But the way that you did it was so uh, genuine. There was so much intention to it. And I think that as artists, we all we create from something that generally exists, right? Whether it's just out there in the ether or whether it's a song that somebody else wrote, like what's the book by Cleon where all art is theft, right? So I guess my question is, how do you take something that maybe you've written or maybe someone else has written and then just bring it in to make it authentically yours?
Well, I think for starters, if it's a song that's not mine, it's got to be a song that I feel akin to
Mm.
for one reason or another. Um, I think that no matter what we're playing, my philosophy is if I can just be sincere and honest in an interpretation, then it's always going to connect.
Mm.
So maybe for instance, if I'm playing a song, the example I'm going to give is in the rare instance that I get hired as a sideman to play with somebody else, which
Okay.
I love. A lot less headache and responsibility. I can just go.
There you go.
Um,
Yeah.
but let's say we're playing a song that it doesn't mean much to me. Um, then it becomes with what can I do with this song? And so then it becomes the sound of the instrument, the groove of the song.
Mm.
And then I just let my own personal improvisation ideas flow where they may in that moment. And whatever my interpretation is, hopefully it's coming across as real. Um, so like for instance, if I'm learning a new theory approach on the clarinet as far as improvisation goes, I'll listen to all different types of players, even music that I don't care for. Like for instance, this is just my opinion. I'm not really big into progressive jazz, but
Okay.
what I'll do is I'll listen to those guys and learn from them, because my mind wouldn't necessarily approach something the way they would. But perhaps learning what they do will give me a springboard into something of my own. So there's been times where I'll think, okay, I'm going to take this solo from this song and regurgitate it on stage because it's got some really fancy stuff in it.
Mm.
And every time I've done that, you can just feel the spirit in the room. Nobody's really latching on to it.
Oh, interesting.
Because
Because it's a like a copy
well,
in a
it's not
sense.
necessarily a copy, but it might be because I'm trying to force something just to be fancy.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So then this comes back down to being just authentic. Okay.
Mm.
So Benny Goodman, for instance, one of the few people that made jazz and swing popular music. Okay. He had a way of playing that was so infectious and joyful, and my heart connects with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take his ideas now and build my own ideas on top of that. And when I go out there, I can see the connection with people is 10 times what it would be, you know. So I know it's a long-winded answer to your question,
That's great.
but yeah, I think it just comes down to me trying to interpret something musically the way I feel it appeals to me. And then if it's okay with me, generally the audience will get it because I'm just being real,
Yeah, it's
you know,
authentic to you.
being yourself. You know, it's like you and I sitting here. We're just being ourselves, so it's good communication. You know, I think music's got to be the same way.
Well, yeah, any creation, right? I mean, any creation that we have, whether it's music, art, a business, a conversation, the more authentic we can be, the more it tends to flow.
Right.
I my observation, Dave, is that we've lost a lot of authenticity in this world, and we have so many people that are just copying each
Mm.
other, right? I mean, um, you, you drive down the street, you see 10 carbon copies of the same person. You jump online, you see 15 carbon copies of the same type of person, right? And you can really sniff the ones out that just don't seem authentic. And so I think authenticity is something that, at least from my perspective, seems to be lost today, or people are having a hard time finding their own voice. So I want to come back to this idea of authenticity and what you're creating, because that's one of the things that has always resonated with me from the first time I saw you perform to listening to your music on my iPhone. There's a unique authenticity that is always present. So first, if someone's listening to this and they say, "Hey, I'm having a hard time. I've just been copying other people. Maybe they're copying with their business, or they're copying the clothes somebody else wears, or whatever," right? What would you recommend to them to tap into the more authentic side of who they are?
Hmm. Well, probably first thing to do would be sit back and analyze what it is you've been copying. Let's say music wise, because that's just what I understand.
Yeah.
If you got a musician who doesn't know their own thing yet, and they've just been copying, um, take a solo, for instance. This is just an example. Let's say this musician likes to regurgitate a solo they've learned on record from somebody and play it live.
Okay.
Well, let's just start off small. Let's take that solo and have that person change one little thing in the solo
Mm,
and make it, then play it a second time and change two little things
mm,
until they get to the point where they use that music they've been copying as just kind of a canvas. Gives them all sorts of analytical ideas. They can look at it and then start changing it, making it their own. That's the initial step. What that does mentally, and the reason I'm using this example is because this is how I've done it. Because I didn't know if I could ever write music. I tried for years and nothing ever came.
mm.
But I found this method seems to work for me, and it might work for somebody else, is all the things that a person may be copying and building up their um, kind of their library of ideas, just use that and change it around to make it their own. And then before they know it, those analytical skills of shaping their own ideas will start to take more effect than the copying. And I don't know, that might apply for business, it might apply for art, but being creative and being yourself, sometimes that's a different skill level or a different skill set than copying something. You know,
Yeah.
it's like I could sit here all day and learn how to play other people's music, but if I'm not sharpening my tools as a songwriter or as an improviser, those abilities tend to go away because you're not keeping them sharp, you know. So I would use that as kind of a canvas to build off of.
It's a great way to go because I remember learning that as a visual artist back in the day, where we would have to copy certain masterworks, but then find a way to change it to make something unique about it. So you're learning the technique and you're learning the skill set, but then you're also leaning into this idea or the skill set of creating your own. I think it's
Yeah,
a great way to look at it. You know, I think all artists have methods. They have a process. They have some sort of system or way of creating. In fact, a few years back, I picked up a book on the different daily habits and routines of artists. And the one thing I walked away with that is that all artists, we're all crazy to a certain degree, right?
absolutely.
Some more than others. I think it was Mozart that would wake up in the morning and fill up the bathtub and, take a bath and then walk around naked for hours at a time with the water was everywhere and it would just seep down into the apartment below him. And he just didn't care, right? And he would take his breakfast and he would take his lunch. He would have people bring it in, and here he is wandering around in his apartment naked. And I read this book and hearing about these different habits and ideas and things that artists would do, and I think, well, okay, so we're all a little bit crazy. Some of us maybe more than others, but we all have a method to our madness
Right, right.
that gets us to the point of creation. What is when you're going into a creative session, whether you're maybe just practicing or you're trying to write music, walk us through what your process is. What do you do to kind of get in the mood?
Well, for me, morning is best.
Okay.
You know, I'm not freaked out about something during the day. You know, you got to have concentration. So I always find mornings are good because everything's settled and you're
Mm.
fresh. So that's number one. Um, what I'll do next is I might learn another song that I'm totally unfamiliar with, whether it's on guitar or the clarinet, because then that'll jumpstart me thinking analytically.
Okay.
And um, and then after that, I'll just take what I've learned, whether it's a different chord progression at the piano or a voicing or a certain idea on the clarinet, and I'll just start tinkering with it.
Mm.
You know, seeing what happens. As far as writing a song, what I might do, since it would just be me in the room, I always react to chord progressions. Those set the mood, you know. So what I'll do is I'll flip the recorder on, sit at the piano, and start playing chords, and then maybe just singing a melody, anything that comes out of my mind, and record everything that I do, and then go back and listen and see if I came up with anything that's worth keeping. Um, sometimes a lot of times there isn't, which is another reason why I honestly, writing music for me is like pulling teeth. I don't enjoy the process because
Mm.
sometimes you sit there for 6 or 7 days and nothing happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you might land when you do land on something, then then you're on the chase and you just keep experimenting. And like I say, for me, I have to record everything or else all these ideas get lost, you know. And then I just record everything, keep playing, and then I'll keep coming back to it and keep whittling it away. Occasionally, a song might come out in one take. I've had I've had one or two songs like that where they played themselves,
Mm.
sang themselves, but generally that's not the case. So yeah, for me to be in a creative place, I got to make sure that I'm just everything's quiet and I can go there without any distraction. But I need something to build off of. You know, for me, I some people are really gifted where they can just write songs no problem and they have it in them. I need something to feed off of
Mhm.
to jump,
Yeah.
you know. That's
It,
kind of how I approach it.
it's interesting how we all have our own process. I'm curious. Stephen Pressfield, in his book, The War of Art, talks about just the importance of showing up regularly to your craft, to your creation, whether it's music or writing or whatever your creation is. How important has consistency been in your creative process?
It's a must, you know, and I'm just as human as anybody else. I mean, there's times I'm so disgusted or fatigued from travel that I can't face it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really a must because me personally, it goes away very quickly. If I don't practice for one day, all that subconscious music stuff in my mind really starts getting quieter. And if it's a few days that I can't play for whatever reason, coming back to it is really painful because it's like everything has gone away. And then it comes back, but it's not an easy process. So if at all possible, just to make up something every day if you can. You know, whether it's just a melody line or something, just to keep going. And some days are better than others where you can spend, if I can practice 5 or 6 hours in a day, that's a very good day. And I can get lost in that space and become creative. But if I can just sit down for an hour and try something, it's key, you know.
Yeah,
That's
I did.
just for me. I mean, like I say, I for me, this is none of this comes easy. People are surprised when they hear that, but none of this comes easy.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you say that. I've actually never met anybody that I would consider, accomplished that said, "Oh yeah, it all came easy." Right? It is difficult whether you're creating music, art, or just a life. Right? I mean, I don't know of anybody that if they're being honest with themselves. There have been a few people that tell a beautiful story, and then the more I dive into it, they're like, "No, it's really hard work." So I, I love
But
to hear you say
uh,
that.
I heard an interview with Jerry Seinfeld recently, and he said it's all about finding the kind of torture that you can live with.
Yes. Yeah.
And I
That,
love that.
yeah.
It's like, you know, I would much rather be stressed out doing something that I love, you know, and because there's you can be stressed out doing a job you hate, and I'm thankful every day that that's not the case, you know. I mean,
I don't know if it was in the same interview that you saw, but he said as well that I can't remember who it was that gave him the advice, but it was right before he got going on the Seinfeld show. But the advice he got was fail in exactly the way that you want to fail.
yeah,
Right. And I loved that. I love that. He said, if I would have done Seinfeld and did it someone else's way and it would have failed, I wouldn't have felt satisfied. If I would have done it someone else's way and it was successful, I wouldn't have felt satisfied. He said that was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got.
yeah. I mean, we get one shot in life. I mean, if you're going to go down, let's just make it doing something that you feel 100% that you're behind, you know?
You've achieved some pretty spectacular things in your career, and you mentioned before we started the recording that you really have you feel like that from a musical standpoint, all of your initial dreams have been realized, and now you're working on dreaming bigger dreams. Talk about some of those accomplishments and what were they and why did they feel or how did they feel?
Okay, so when I got into Benny Goodman, I got his at that time it was VHS, you know, biography on him, and it talked about the famous Carnegie Hall concert he did in
Mm,
1938, first
mhm.
jazz concert ever there. And that was my dream. Someday I want to play Carnegie Hall.
Nice.
Just it was just this dream. So Benny played Carnegie Hall, I think, when he was either 28 or 29 years old. And in 2008, we did 5 sold out shows with the Detroit Symphony doing a tribute to Benny Goodman.
Mm,
And the conductor, Steve Reinecke, was the conductor at that time. And he had just gotten the job as pops conductor with the New York Pop Symphony. And he said, look, in 2013, they're going to have the 75th anniversary of the Benny Goodman concert at Carnegie Hall. And
Wow.
if I can work this, I want to have you guys do it. So in 2013, I was 29, and we got asked to play Carnegie Hall. So my band guested with the New York Pops, and we did the show and played all of Benny's music. And it, it was, I was walking on air. So for instance, the show that we played that night, I'd played many times, but I remember I went over that show for the 3 months prior to it, just so it was in my blood. And I just remember that trip. It was unreal. I wasn't nervous at all. I was just extremely grateful. And I remember being on stage and just thinking, wow, this is unreal. I was so eternally grateful. My family was there, friends, they traveled in
Mhm.
New York. I think might have gotten 2 or 3 standing ovations throughout the show. And
Wow.
it was it was just something that, dreams are made of. So that was really, really something, you
Yeah,
know.
I can imagine.
That
I
was
can't
the
even
big one.
imagine what that would be. Very surreal to be doing
Yeah.
a concert 75 years later of your early muses work
Yeah,
in the exact same place. Wow.
it was really something. It was just a treasured memory, that I keep to this day. So that was the big one. Um, I used to at an early age dream of being on the road and performing for thousands of people and playing my own music
Hmm.
eventually. And now that I'm doing that now, I've gotten to do that. And I've gotten to play with some of Benny Goodman's old musicians.
Oh wow.
In 2008, they took me to Switzerland. Bucky Pizzarelli, guitar player, and Peter Appleyard was a vibraphone player. And they toured with Benny for years. So I got to stand in Benny's spot, and I got their stamp of approval. And then a couple of years ago, we played in Florida, and I met through Facebook a guy named Bill Taylor, and Bill was from Memphis, and he had written, I think, 20 some of Jerry Lee Lewis's country hits.
Oh really?
Played in Jerry Lee's band in the prime time.
Okay.
And he was at Sun Studios when Elvis Presley came there. He wrote one of Elvis's songs, I'm Right, You're Left, She's Gone.
Wow. Okay.
So he came to the show. So, I already got a stamp of approval from the jazz guys, which I was really grateful for. But as far as playing the Jerry Lee stuff, I mean, I was really nervous because here this guy was there. I mean, he was there
Yeah.
at the rock and roll, and he's going to watch me. And I'm thinking, oh, geez. I'm like, Lord, please let me be able to do this right. And he congratulated me afterwards. And so, just as a personal thank you, having gotten that kind of that stamp of approval from that older generation that was there that said, yeah, that was great. That meant everything. What it did was
Yeah.
it just let me know that I'm doing the right thing.
Very
It wasn't
cool.
an ego thing. It was just a need of that boost. So yeah, I mean, yeah, everything that I've dreamed of so far has come. And I'm at the spot now where I'm trying to rethink of where I want to go. And
Talk about along the way. What are some of the biggest hurdles that you've had to overcome? What are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome as you have been working towards these dreams and these goals?
the biggest hurdle I ever had to face was I went through a little over 3 years of extreme stage fright,
Mhm.
which happened when I was 32 years old. Started when I was 32, believe it or not. So this is after Carnegie Hall and all these things. Up until that point, even before I took the stage of the biggest concert stage, I was never nervous. I was just like, okay, let's do it. Let's have some fun. It was this feeling of joy. Well, I uh, I played a show in Arizona, University of Arizona. And unfortunately, I've always had a real sensitive stomach, you know.
Mm.
And let me just rewind this a little bit further back. By the time I was 17 years old, I was on 8 medications.
Wow.
I was on 2 blood pressure medications, 2 stomach medications, and then I was on 4 antidepressants.
Wow.
Doctor at the time thought I was quote unquote bipolar, but looking back on it now, I was just a very sensitive young man, especially when you're 16, 17, you got all this stuff flying through you.
Yeah.
Looking back on it now, I don't think that was the case. But so anyway, all this stuff. Well, you know, I'm not recommending other people do this, but for me, I started a natural health lifestyle in my mid 20s, which everything started to get better. My blood pressure dropped, my stomach got better. But then for me, I started going on natural supplements, which started to help how I felt mood wise.
Mm-hmm.
So I began slowly weaning myself on these meds. And like I said, I'm not telling anybody else to do this, but this is just what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And the one medication that was the last one to go uh, caused a little bit of anxiety in me. So I was on stage at the University of Arizona, and Sing 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 is our big finishing number. And for me, that's like the apex of the show. Well, as I'm playing Sing Sing Sing, I ate something for dinner and my stomach started to bother me. And then my nerves started really tripping out on me. So I remember I had to cut the song short and then feature the piano player, and I had to leave the stage.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, this terror got lodged in me that number one, I failed on stage. In my mind, I failed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So from that point on, the stage fright got worse and worse. I remember right after that we played in Houston with the Houston Symphony, and they had these big jumbotron screens that you know made you huge. And every show that we did, I felt like I was literally having a nervous breakdown on the inside. 3,000
Wow.
people tonight. And I'm thinking, okay, why is this happening to me now? You know, I've been doing this my whole life, and this fear got lodged in. I should be able to shoo this away. So for the next, it was over 3 years or so. It got to be where even if I was in a room playing for 20 people, I had to go on stage with completely empty stomach, void of any water, and I was scared to death. And it leaked over into being just around people. You know, it kept worse and worse and worse. So there was a period there where I thought, am I going to have to give this up? Because I was terrified of being on stage. I hid it well. Nobody knew it, you know, but inside it was crippling. So I can't really say that there's any one moment that cured it. But you know, I'm a Christian, and I kept praying. I'm thinking, why is this happening? You know, and I had the counsel of my 2 pastors and a close group of friends that really supported me during this whole time. And slowly but surely that this cloud started to lift. It wasn't instantaneous, but and I can't tell you exactly why I went through that period. I know that I've been able to help some other people that have gone through the similar anxiety because I'd been there, and they've never really guessed that I had gone through that because, like I say, I did it really well. Looking back on it now, I think a lot of it had to do also with dietary issues that I've come to find out I have. There's food allergies that I have. And since I've straightened a lot of that out, that's helped even more so. So I think there was a physiological reason too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would say that that was the biggest hurdle I had to overcome. You know, my mom passed away unexpectedly at age 49 when I was 23. I'm an only child. So that was something that rocked our whole foundation.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I can imagine.
so, there's, if you tap anybody on the shoulder randomly in the street, everybody's had hard times and tragedy. I'm no different than anybody else, but those are just some of the things that they're just in my story that were somewhat crippling at the time, but through God's grace, I've been pointed to the correct doctors and health to help me through these things.
And that was something that, as you told me that story before, I thought I can relate to almost every detail. Obviously, I'm not standing on stage in front of thousands of people, but I would go give lectures and speeches, and I'm standing on stage in front of sometimes a dozen and sometimes a couple of hundred, and I would get the same thing. And it wasn't. It took me a few years to figure out that a lot of it became this cycle and this loop of fear, but a lot of it was related to digestive issues that I was dealing with. And it took me a long time to figure out what was it specifically about the nutrition that was wrong for my body. And once I figured that out, no more issues. But, like you, it was every time I would go stand on stage, or it all actually got to the point where I would be terrified to fly. I would be terrified to get in an Uber or a taxi because I'm thinking, well, what if my stomach starts giving me trouble, right? What if, and I remember one time I'd gone to a doctor and she told me point blank, she's like, oh, there's nothing you could do other than just take medication for it. I'm like, no, no way. There's no, I'm not doing that. That can't be the answer. There's got to be a better answer. And so it took me a while, but I got to the point where through some great coaches and partners and friends that I've got in the health and fitness industry, that we narrowed it down to what was causing me issues. And as soon as I cut those things out of my diet, uh, haven't had the issues ever since. But
Wow.
the anxiety that it brings up was just unbelievable. And like you, I was really good at hiding it. No one knew when I, when I was struggling. And so when you said that the other day as we talked, I thought, yeah, I can resonate with that at a very, very deep level. That's a big challenge. And it also makes me wonder how many people just tend to suffer in silence as they go through. And, we look at other people and we say, wow, that person's very successful. Uh, but we all have our challenges along the way. So I appreciate you sharing that story. I think that can be very impactful for people. Um,
Well, we're all, we all got our stuff. Every one of
yeah,
us.
yeah, yeah, we
Um,
do for sure. What you do is very physical. I mean, you do rock and roll, you do jazz, like you're just you're moving a lot. And I know that one of the things that's a passion of yours is the health and fitness aspect, taking care of your body, but also you've gotten involved in the classical bodybuilding type of mindset. Talk a little bit about what improving your health and fitness, improving your nutrition, and getting into health and fitness more has done for you and your career, but also your life.
well, I started lifting weights when I was about 12. And one of the reasons I did at that time was I was always a foot taller than everybody else, but I was extremely shy, extremely
Mhm.
sensitive. So, there's that insecurity thing I think that a lot of young guys go through. So it kind of
Mhm.
helped me get a little more self-confidence just to be among the rest of the guys. But uh, I took an interest in powerlifting when I was a late teen, and I did that for about 5 or 6 years. And but with that, I put on about 60 pounds
Wow.
because in my strength, I was going to start competing. But then to be honest, I just felt so miserable because my diet was terrible, just about getting more weight on and getting stronger.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, I thought I got to start changing this.
I think nowadays they call that a dirty bulk. You just eat whatever you can and
I
you get a little
know.
bit of muscle and a lot of fat. I
Oh,
remember those days.
so anyway, when I was probably 29. I was at my gym, and there's an old timer in there. He was probably in his 70s or 80s, and I started taking a little bit of an interest in the bodybuilding world because I've always lifted, but I was changing what I was doing. So he says, "You're doing a lift like Vince Gironda."
Mm,
I said, "Vince Gironda," and he told me, he says, "Well, he's this guy that I grew up reading about." So the next time I was in there, he gave me a booklet of Vince's that was called Four Sides to a Muscle. And he said, read up on this guy. So, all right. So I started reading his literature and about workouts that were really quick, very brief, but very controlled, and this mixture of doing different shapings. And then the diet thing, very clean, higher protein, fats, vegetables. And I mean, this was a whole thing I was totally unfamiliar with. I just kind of did things instinctively, which wasn't a good idea. I got nowhere, you know.
yeah.
So, I started following Vince's stuff. I started following this booklet, and within 2 months, I noticed my body started changing.
Yeah.
I thought that's interesting because it wasn't lifting heavy, but it was shaping, and it was the dietary things started to affect my mind. I was thinking clearer. So all these things started happening. I thought, well, this is a completely different world than I'd ever learned about before. So I went on the Vince Gironda website and I bought all of his courses. It was this giant zip file, and I bought them all.
Nice.
And started doing his routines. I'm still doing a lot of his routines. There were certain movements that I found I couldn't do because they were just the angles were odd, and I'm not as flexible perhaps as he was, so I had to steer away from certain things. But like he recommended doing these workouts very quickly
Hmm.
to increase your cardiovascular. And the shows that I do, I mean, obviously, if I go on stage, I just want to look as good as I can.
Right.
But I also needed to have the endurance to do these shows. So when you're up there for an hour and a half or two playing clarinet, guitar, singing, and then playing piano and jumping up and down. I mean, each show is it's like an Olympic event, mentally and physically. And I really needed the stamina to be able to keep doing this. And I found that those old school methods helped me, along with the nutrition thing, to have a much clearer mind, to physically be able to handle the the jumps and yeah, the crazy angles I put myself at the piano,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it went from as a young man wanting to lift heavy and be strong and everything. Now it's more about, okay, I just want my vessel to feel good. I don't want there to be any aches and pains. I just want to keep sailing as gracefully as I can. So I'm still constantly tweaking things, but
Yeah. That's how life is, right?
yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at right now with that whole thing.
Vince's stuff is fascinating to me, as you and I've talked about. So Vince was, I mean, a revolutionary. He was the guy that helped all of my early mentors. Frank Zane and Larry Scott. Vince trained those guys, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, they picked up a lot of the information from him. And I think part of what was so revolutionary about Vince is he could help people craft beautiful bodies that were also extremely functional too. If you look at these old school classic bodybuilders, they were strong, they were flexible, they could move well. Um, and it was as much about their health and fitness as it was, looking a certain way. It's interesting what you said about you want to look good, but you also want to feel good. I think back to what one of my early mentors, Frank Zane, who was a three-time Mr. Olympia, told me. He said, Steve, originally when I started bodybuilding, and he says, I think this is the same for everybody, was like character armor. right? You put the muscles on because you don't necessarily feel confident about yourself. But then
Sure.
over time, bodybuilding becomes character development. And he says once you start to develop yourself internally, then the bodybuilding helps you to push further so that you develop your character more. It becomes the thing that helps you to become better in every other area of life. And that really stuck with me. I mean, I can't remember. I want to say I was in my late 20s when I first trained with Frank, and that stuck with me, to this day. That at the beginning, there might be just I want to look better, I want to be stronger, right? But then down the road, it's not like that goes away, because I think we all have aesthetic goals and there's nothing wrong with them. It's like, I mean, as I tell my clients all the time, nobody says, oh, I want to go to the sewers of Chicago and go on vacation. You go to a beautiful place because we're drawn to beauty, right?
Of
And we're
course.
drawn to beauty and aesthetics in the way we look as well. So I don't think there's anything wrong with an aesthetic goal. But as we get older, we tend to take on more of that. And I still want to perform well. I want to
Sure.
be able to
Absolutely.
do what I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
With hitting the big 4-0 this last week, which again, happy birthday. I know I texted you on your
Thank you.
birthday,
And
but
happy birthday to you too.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. We're kindred spirits here in many things, and our birthday being like a week apart from each
I
other
know.
as well. What's changing in your fitness journey at this point, as a 40-year-old man now?
Well, I I had some vulnerabilities in my upper back and neck the last 6 years. And I found that each time I was performing, something was going out. And and there were certain things at the gym that were irritating it. And I didn't know what was up.
Mm.
So I see a naturopath who does chiropractor work, and I see a chiropractor besides that. The naturopath does muscle testing
Yep.
using reflex analysis. So if I do a certain movement, he'll use a surrogate, like a nurse, and she'll hold her arm out. And if I do a certain movement, like let's say I'm at the piano and I put my head back and I start going like this,
Mm-hmm.
if that's detrimental to me, her arm will go limp.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to the observer who may not be familiar with that sort of testing, it may seem like, is this for real? But what we did over a few years was I would show him videos of me playing,
Mm-hmm.
and we test all the different movements that I would do on stage. And I've had to cut out certain things that I would do on stage. And once I did that, and for instance, corrected my posture, like if I'm sitting at the piano, I had a tendency to shift my body like this while my hands were here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, apparently that was causing an imbalance. So now what I have to do is I have to keep my body straight. I can still keep my head to the right, but I have to keep everything loose. And so not only do I have to think about the music and the lyrics and everything else, but I'm thinking about posture and how I'm moving.
Yeah.
It's a lot of things to be thinking about. But since I've been changing these things, I've been getting stronger and the pain has lessened. And we're trying to strengthen those muscles that surround those discs and vertebrae. Now, there's been no real damage or anything like that, but a couple of discs have been irritated, so we're trying to get that corrected. So at this point right now, people will joke and they'll say, well, you're 40 now, so you can't be jumping around the piano anymore. And there's part of me that says,
Yeah. No way. You
I'm
can't.
not listening to that. Listen, so my plan is to just keep problem solving anything that comes up, because the amount of joy that I get doing this, whether it's clarinet, guitar, or piano, it just makes life worth living. And then seeing everybody else be happy, I just want to continue doing this as long as the good Lord will let me. And I have a feeling that that's what I'm here to do. And if I can do it for the next 20 or 30 years, great. But I just have to be a little bit more conscious of things because, body has wear and tear.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just trying to be as smart as I can. I mean, if something's not working, I don't want to be foolish. I want to fix it. So that's where I'm at right now.
we have to be a little bit more conscious as we get older, because the body doesn't recover the same, right? And so adjusting those things. But what's great is that as we age, we can become better. We can become stronger. We can become, more flexible. Like, we have the ability to do all of those things. Age has nothing to do with it. Now, yes, certain aches and pains might last a little bit longer, or recovery capabilities go down, but there's so much that we can do to just continually improve as we age. So I love that mindset.
Yeah, and I agree completely. So, like I told you, I'm off of all the medications now. I
Mm-hmm.
take a lot of natural supplements. I'm getting my diet straightened out. And, except for straightening the upper thoracic thing out, thankfully, I do feel better than I did when I was 21.
Yeah, that's great.
The mind is clearer. It's
Yeah.
just trying to just tweak things as best I can. But I will say this much: these old bodies are a lot of maintenance, aren't they?
They do. You
It's
have
like,
to take
oh
them
my
into the
God,
shop more often.
man,
That's for
like,
sure.
come on, give me a break here.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I know we're coming up on our time, but tell our audience what's coming up for you. What are you what shows are you playing? Where can people find you? How can they learn more about you and the amazing work that you do?
Well, if anybody would like to come to a show, we spend about 80% of the year traveling around the country, but I'll be mainly in Michigan or Indiana this summer. It's just,
Okay.
the touring dies down. Once September rolls around, we're going to be in British Columbia, California, Sun Valley, Idaho, Florida. It's always nice to go to Florida when the winter months come.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say
We're going to be in
Sun
Seattle.
Valley to Florida. That's a big shift
But
in the cold
if
months.
you go to davebennett.com, my itinerary is there, and sign up for the monthly newsletter. But I'm also working on a new album with my pastor, Tom Hampton. He's
Oh, very
an,
cool.
an amazing singer and guitar player. And what he does, we'll play together at church. And he brings in songs that are about real life.
Mm.
It's things that people can really relate to. And he always leads them to the gospel. And we became best of friends. So we've been wanting to do a project together for a long time. And finally, we got the chance to do it. So we went into the studio. He laid down his tracks. I put down my clarinet tracks. And now we're at the point where we're going to review the songs and see what other instruments we want to add to it. But hopefully the album will be out sometime by the end of the year. And this is really special because I don't know, when he and I get together, there's just this really good thing that happens, and it'd be fun to travel, him and I as a duo, and play some different circles,
Yeah, that
so
sounds great.
see
It's
what happens.
amazing when you've got a good creative collaboration like that.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. It's exciting.
Yeah. Oh, good for you. Well, Dave, I've always believed that evolved men are men that grow in all areas of life. Right? You evolve your body, it's so that you can evolve your mind, so that you can evolve your soul, so that you can evolve your tribe. And I think you are the living embodiment of that. I believe that a major part of evolving in life is finding what it is that's unique and authentic to you that you can give to the world and create in the way that is the most authentic expression of you. So I can't thank you enough for coming on. What a great conversation we've had, and I really appreciate the time.
Hey man, it's been a total honor, and I'm glad to call you my friend. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you as well.
Thanks for joining me today for this episode of The Evolved Man. If you're learning from and gaining value from this podcast, please subscribe to the Evolved Man newsletter, where I can support you even more in your personal evolution. I want to help you reverse engineer your success. The Evolved Man newsletter is like getting a free coaching session to keep you moving forward on your path of personal success. Go to theevolvedmanpodcast.com to sign up today. If you found value in this episode, you can give us up to a 5-star rating on Apple and Spotify and share it with your network. That's the best way to support the podcast so we can continue to get great guests and provide you with the best wisdom for your daily life. Until next time, keep evolving.